So the goal, as I think you all know based on the information that we sent out about this webinar, was to highlight examples of some of the family involvement innovations that were developed by states that participated in Models for Change Mental Health Juvenile Justice Action Network, and in particular feature the work of two states, Pennsylvania and Texas, both of which focused on the development of new innovations and resources to help the juvenile justice system improve their response to family members. We have two presenters lined up today. Our first presenter is Wendy Luckenbill. She has led Pennsylvania's work to strengthen family involvement within the justice system since 2007 at both the individual, child, and systems level. She's a recognized expert on family advocacy, children's mental health, systems of care, and related children's policy, including juvenile justice family involvement practice and policy. She led Pennsylvania's Models for Change efforts to enhance family involvement and has co-authored numerous resources on this issue, including a groundbreaking monograph, a family guide to Pennsylvania's juvenile justice system, and most recently, their family involvement in juvenile justice training curriculum for juvenile probation officers. Our second presenter is Dr. Tracy Levins, who currently manages prevention and early intervention services for the Texas Juvenile Justice Department. Tracy has over 20 years of experience in the juvenile justice and mental health systems, has worked extensively with communities, organizations, policymakers throughout Texas to help youth access services and the resources they need. She was a representative on the Texas Mental Health Action Network team and was a 2010 nominee for Outstanding Woman in Texas Government for her work to develop the first ever Parents' Bill of Rights for the Texas Juvenile Justice Department, which at the time was the Texas Youth Commission, implementing the Family Liaison Initiative in state juvenile correctional facilities, and co-authoring the inaugural comprehensive family handbook entitled Understanding the Texas Juvenile Justice Department. So we're thrilled to have both of these amazing women with us today. Before I turn it over to Wendy, I wanted to provide some context for all of you to understand how some of this work came to be. Back in 2004, the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation launched something called Models for Change, which was a national juvenile justice reform effort that was created to help develop sustainable and replicable models of juvenile justice reform in selected states that could be adopted by other states and other jurisdictions that were struggling with the same kinds of issues. 4 states were selected to participate in Models for Change: Pennsylvania, Illinois, Louisiana, and Washington State. And not surprisingly to us, as part of the strategic planning process that those states went through, all 4 of these states identified mental health as a major challenge to their juvenile justice reform efforts. And this bit of information was not lost on the MacArthur Foundation, who used it as an opportunity to create an issue-oriented network that would include the 4 core Models for Change states, as well as 4 new partner states who would work together as part of this action network exclusively around mental health and juvenile justice reform efforts. So the action network was operational between 2008 through 2011. Our National Center for Mental Health and Juvenile Justice coordinated the work of this action network, and over the course of these 3 years, the state teams involved got together on many, many occasions, identified 3 critical issues that they wanted to take on as a group, and then set out to actually do the work to create the resources and create the tools around these issues. The first issue they took on was the issue of early diversion, creating more opportunities for youth with mental health needs to be safely and appropriately diverted to community-based treatment in lieu of juvenile justice system involvement. The second issue was that of workforce development and creating new training and education materials to help juvenile justice line staff better understand basic adolescent development concepts and adolescent mental health. And if anyone is interested in information or resources or the results of that work of the network, please visit our Collaborative for Change website, because we have numerous resources on that site for all of those projects. But the last, and I would say most passionate project that the Action Network took on was the issue of family involvement. And the sense among the Action Network states was that there were many families who wanted to be more involved in their child's care and treatment while they were involved with the juvenile justice system, but lacked sufficient knowledge about the system itself, and as well as advocacy skills to be able to advocate for their children effectively. At the same time, we were also hearing that juvenile justice system staff were often very frustrated by their inability to sufficiently engage and involve family members in their work, and quite frankly, some of them were feeling that this wasn't terribly important, and they didn't understand or see the benefit of kind of developing partnerships with families. So the Action Network states felt it critical to develop new resources that would do two things. First of all, help family members better understand and navigate the juvenile justice system so that they could become stronger advocates, not only for their own children, but for all children involved with the system. And the other set of resources would target juvenile justice system staff to help them recognize the value and the benefit of working with families, better understand their perspective and where they're coming from, and also to help them improve their own individual engagement skills. So I'm going to pause right now before I turn it over to Wendy, who's our first speaker, to just tell you that we are going to post a couple of polling questions. I think they've just gone up on the site. We're interested in learning who our audience is on this webinar. And so the first question, which I'm presuming most of you can see, but if you're doing this webinar from a phone, you might not have a computer screen. So the first question is just ask which of the following most closely describes your role. We're interested in family advocates, juvenile justice professionals, service providers, or someone else in a helping profession. And then the second question is whether your organization or agency has policies and practices in place to support family involvement. If folks could just take a minute to answer those two questions, that would be really helpful before we, just for us to have a sense of who's on the call, who's on this webinar, and how we can kind of plan and shape our future work in this area. So with that, I am ready to turn it over to our first presenter.
And thank you.
Wendy Luckenbell.
Okay. Hi, Kathy. Thank you for the nice introduction and overview. And welcome everybody to this webinar. I hope that it's interesting to you, and I'm really going to be excited to hear your feedback and questions, so please stay involved. And I can move my own slides, so I can do that. So as Kathy said, I have been involved with family involvement in juvenile justice implementation in Pennsylvania under the Models for Change program, and our Mental Health Juvenile Justice Committee originally started our juvenile justice family involvement work, but it has been adopted by our Pennsylvania Council of Chief Juvenile Probation Officers. So that's good, because now we're in with the groove. I want to talk a little bit about our history. I want to give an overview of the products and activities that have come out of this work, and I want to talk to you a little bit about next steps for Pennsylvania and how that might relate to what you're doing in your state or agency. We did identify under Pennsylvania's Models for Change that family involvement was a major issue. We certainly have been talking about family involvement in juvenile justice since the beginning of juvenile justice, but we hadn't had any substantive conversations or any policies or practices that were directed towards it. So this really was new work. And our work group was convened with juvenile justice and family advocacy leaders, which I think is really important, that we had this tremendous partnership between these two diverse groups from the very beginning, who hadn't spent a lot of time really talking to each other, despite the fact that we'd have lots of system of care and CAST principles and BARD. We really hadn't spent enough time talking with each other. And this then led to the development of the Family Involvement Monograph, which is our famous red book. If you haven't seen it already, you can get it on the center site. But let me tell you a little bit about it. It was published in 2009. It has now served as a cornerstone for subsequent work that we've been doing on this issue, and it was based on input not only from our committee that we were working from and those great leaders that I just talked about, but we went out and talked to 16 different focus groups that represented all the stakeholders, 200 participants in total. So we really had quite a few people giving information, which then came up with some very consistent findings. First of all, we heard from everybody, but particularly it was important to hear from families that they really had a history of frustration with the children's system, and they felt that if they had access to effective early intervention and prevention, including information, that they thought their child might have been diverted from any involvement with juvenile justice whatsoever. And that was really supported by the judges and juvenile probation officers and so forth, who really thought that a lot of kids were getting involved in the juvenile justice system that didn't need to be there, that should have had maybe mental health services or early intervention services under education. Communicating respect was our next finding, that everybody wanted to be respected and that it was a key to engagement, and that seems like a simple principle that everybody should have known about. And we did, but we didn't have practical application. So it's really important to emphasize how much all this relationship building between families and the juvenile justice system begins with respect. We looked at the juvenile court policy and practice, that we really needed to have specific efforts at the local level to improve family engagement. And finally, on the state level, and we are a Commonwealth, so every county is independent, but we still have oversight at the state level, and we certainly thought that it was really important to look at this issue from the state level. I want to talk to you a little bit about the principles of family involvement that we distilled from all the input from those 200 participants and from the long conversations that our committee had. And you can read them all, they're in the monograph, but I want to walk to, oh no, I want to go back, sorry, okay. So number 4 is the principle that I really like to emphasize within these numerous principles, and that's that all families will act in the best interest of their child and fulfill their role when they have the knowledge, skills, and supports necessary to provide ongoing and developmentally appropriate guidance and interaction. Now, that is something that we get a lot of pushback from when we do trainings and have other discussions, because a lot of juvenile justice professionals don't have the experience that all families act in the best interest of their child. But this is modified by the next principle, which is where families are unable to act in the best interest of their child. This should be seen as a complex phenomenon that the family would choose to counteract if an avenue to do so presented itself. So we really ask everybody to assume the positive, assume best intentions, and assume if there's a reason why a family can't be involved or even shouldn't be involved, that there's reasons that go way beyond just a lack of interest, that there's a history of trauma or mental health problems or just alienation from systems. They may have been involved in systems themselves and just have a lack of trust, but there's reason why families may be difficult to engage. So the monograph really led to some very specific work that we're now doing. The first thing we did was take the monograph out and hold 3 regional forums to make sure that the field and also families and community leaders knew about the monograph, knew about the ideas that were in it, and we asked them to respond to those ideas and asked them to present things that they were doing locally, which there was a lot of local action that wasn't really being tracked and codified, but also there was areas where families and juvenile probation officers really had never talked outside the process. And so this was a very interesting, strong way to build momentum. And the second thing that it led to is the development of policy and tools. And Kathy already talked a little bit about that, but as far as tools go, we think our curriculum for juvenile probation staff, which has now been adapted for other populations, is a really strong tool. We didn't want to train families or just assume that people knew how to do this. We thought it was really going to take a very mindful approach. Secondly, to build that the respect that we were talking about, we developed a family guide, which we think has a really interesting voice. We also had our family involvement principles adopted as a core value running across the whole juvenile justice system enhancement strategy that we're now implementing in Pennsylvania to make sure that everything that we did under the Models for Change program is sustained. And finally, as far as working on some state-level stuff, we are now developing a satisfaction survey because we thought maybe the first thing that we could measure, since we didn't measure anything before except whether families were living together or apart while their child was involved in juvenile justice, we thought we could start by measuring how well families felt included and part of their child's juvenile justice experience. Then we can start to measure some other factors down the road. But first, let's get a baseline because we had none. Now, the curriculum is based on the family involvement curriculum, MONOGRAPH, and all those principles and findings that we had. It's based also on the consensus that a training was needed for juvenile justice practitioners to enhance their ability to engage with families, because really there isn't a lot out there professionally in the literature or in the academic setting that prepares juvenile justice practitioners to engage with families. While we've done a lot of work in child welfare and mental health, we haven't done the work in juvenile justice, so we believe we're really beginning that with this curriculum. It's based on the experiences of family peer support, so families with lived experience who are helping other families. We brought them in because they really had a broad view of not only their experiences, but what families are going through, and of course, juvenile justice leaders. We used our Pennsylvania Victims Curriculum, which is a very good experiential training curriculum. We used family-centered practices outside juvenile justice, and it was written by a team of experts that had cross-voice experience. We believe the curriculum will lessen families' feelings of confusion and marginalization, increase the practitioner's ability to partner with families, and increase positive outcomes for youth in conflict with the law. So we think that's pretty good. I'm just going to open the question and answer thing again for me so I can see. No, maybe I should. I don't seem, oh, maybe there it is. I just want to make sure that I can see any questions that are coming forward, because I think at some point I'm going to need to answer that. So one of the actual tools we have in our curriculum, besides some just teaching and then a lot of exploring of feelings and experiences for the juvenile practitioners that are going through the process, we also have some tools, including this worksheet, which has several supportive family involvement measures, not just these three. And we ask participants to choose a couple and work on it for a couple months and see if they can improve their family's engagement with the juvenile justice system, and particularly their own caseload. So it's a way to start thinking about what you're doing and how you can increase family engagement. After you go through the worksheet, you actually commit to changing some things. So you might continue to call families before every meeting to make sure they're aware of the meeting and can ask any preliminary questions. We were surprised to find out that most POs don't do that, probation officers. It just wasn't a practice in Pennsylvania. And then you could also increase or decrease a factor that would support or challenge. So I will discuss with my supervisor the possibility that I can share my mobile phone number and email address. What we found is families really are on mobile devices now, and they're not sitting at home waiting for phone calls, so why not use that new technology? And here is an assessment, and I think there's an error in the second column across the second row, but the third one is very much the correct data. We have a doctoral student working with us to compile data, and what we found in the pre and post assessments for the 3 pilots that we did, and this has been consistently the same as we're actually doing the trainings, was that when we asked the participants the benefits of family involvement in the court process outweigh the drawbacks, very much so about half of the folks said that they thought that was true. But we were able to move that to, in just a day and a half, up to almost 80%. So we feel that we really are changing hearts and minds and attitudes, which we believe is at the core of increasing family engagement. We're committed to sustaining the curriculum. It's been added to our training arm at the state level. We've trained more trainers, and we want it ideally to go out as a family and juvenile justice team. We've trained 5 departments, including Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, which are our major cities. And we're expanding it to new audiences, including juvenile defenders, and I just did a training for our detention centers. We're studying the pilot assessments, and we're also studying the legacy event outcomes. And we've also trained 5 other states who came in through that legacy event. So we're very excited about what folks think they can bring to their own work from what we've been working on. We developed a family guide, which is all about respect. Families don't remember what's being said to them, so it's really helpful that it's written down. The contents take the reader through the whole process. It was really hard to write this. This was harder than the curriculum. It took 3 years because we had no documents to give to families that explained the juvenile justice system, surprisingly. And we even had to develop a flow chart. So 100,000 guides have been distributed. It's in our waiting rooms. It's provided at intake and throughout the process. It's used in trainings for our officers and other practitioners. We're translating it into Spanish, and we're establishing an evidence base by studying the impact on families and practice at county probation offices. So we're trying to make sure that it's working and being used. We emphasized that this was not a how to get your kids through juvenile justice and avoid any negative consequences, which is the guides that we were coming across, which said things like, don't talk to the probation officer, don't talk to the police, and painted juvenile justice as a negative experience. A lot of families are glad they're getting the help they've been looking for, and so we tried to write this as a resource to encourage partnership between families and the juvenile justice system, and you can read the content there. What we're doing now in our committee is trying to really track the recommendations we made in the monograph and the measurable action or activity that's coming out of it, and we're using this with our juvenile justice system enhancement strategy. So as far as the survey goes, I thought you might be interested to know these are the questions we're going to be asking across the state. It'll be incorporated into our statewide juvenile justice data tracking system, and we're going to be able to start to get a consistent statewide picture of how families are feeling about these basic kind of concepts, such as I believed I was treated with respect. I had input in the development of my child's case supervision plan. Overall, I believe my child's probation was a success. So that's going to really help us see how the interface looks and where one jurisdiction or another might be struggling in an area, and we can provide then some technical assistance. So our next work is really about sustaining and scaling this with evidence-based practices. We want to have, we already have family involvement goals added to our county juvenile probation annual plans, which allows them to draw down funding for the training and other activities around family involvement. We're publishing our curriculum outcomes. We're lucky to have Kelly working with us. And we're next going to revise our court standards to reflect the family involvement monograph, because there's nothing in our court standards about family involvement. So if you're familiar with the term parents patriae, which I now am, thanks to my juvenile justice friends, it's the state is the parent. And for a long time, I think juvenile justice has really been predicated on that principle. Families and the court, and you might recognize Judge Chivarelli from our famous Luzerne County Kids for Cash disaster, and the mother in the background is a mother whose son actually committed suicide after he came out and just couldn't recover from the experience of being locked up in a very aversive situation. So certainly not that. But really everybody around the table, all partners informed and respected. I think that might be the end. Yes, so Kathy, back to you.
Thank you, Wendy. Before we move on to Tracy, I want to just briefly mention the results of our poll. Thanks to everyone who completed it. In terms of how folks self-identified in terms of their current role, I would say the majority of people who completed the survey are from the juvenile justice system. We had 124 folks identify as juvenile justice system professionals. We have 20 service providers, 13 family advocates, and 21 other. But keep in mind that this doesn't include all the participants on the call. So I think we have an even broader and diverse mix of folks on this webinar. And I'm pleased to say that in response to the second question, the vast majority of you identified that your organizations and your agencies do have policies and practices in place to support family involvement. So that's wonderful and encouraging news. So thank you all for helping us with that. And now we're ready to turn it over to Tracy Levins.
With you. Kathy, thank you so much for this opportunity and for inviting us to be part of this. Family engagement is such an important topic. I am delighted to be part of the conversation today. And a special thanks to the Models for Change and the Mental Health Juvenile Justice Action Network for making a lot of this work possible. We appreciate it very much. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the Texas experience today, but first, I just want to remind us why family engagement is so important. We know that it increases the likelihood that families follow through with education and service plans. We know that it helps families have the skills to respond to situations and challenging behaviors from their children. We know that it reduces recidivism and it promotes positive youth development, and it increases the likelihood that youth successfully reenter their homes, schools, and communities. Now, the Texas model, we really started back in 2007. We went through some significant reform efforts, and I'm going to talk a little bit today about our Parents' Bill of Rights, the family involvement in policy development, our family liaison activities, family engagement, and then our curriculum. Many of these will parallel what Wendy has done as well, and it's been fun being partners with her as we've moved forward in both of our systems. Senate Bill 103 in 2007 called upon what was then the Texas Youth Commission to develop a Parents' Bill of Rights. It came out of some from very angry parents who really did not see that the needs of their kids were being met appropriately. And the legislation at the time told us specifically that we were going to develop this. But it didn't necessarily tell us how. And so what we did is we brought together families, youth, advocates, and staff. We met on Saturdays. I co-chaired that group with a parent member, and by meeting on Saturdays, that made it so that more parents could participate, and we had it at a state juvenile correctional facility so that they could then meet and visit with their kids after we had our meeting. I wanted to do potlucks because, you know, I'm a child of the South. And for those of you who are also children of the South on the phone call, then you recognize that when you have a potluck and you're sharing food with each other, it builds relationships, and it builds trust, and it builds camaraderie. And those are the things that I wanted our work to be based on. And it was probably one of the most unique groups that I've been able to be part of. What we did is we sat down, because what the parents were telling us is that once their child was committed to a state juvenile correctional facility, they felt like they no longer had any rights. And in large part, and sometimes they were treated that way as well. So sitting together with this group of family, youth, advocates, and staff, we outlined exactly what the rights of the parents should be when the kids go into a state juvenile correctional facility. And in our presentation, you'll see I just made them bullet points so they could fit on a couple of slides. But there's also a link to the larger Parents' Bill of Rights that you can see at the bottom of that slide. And it's things like parents and children will be treated fairly, that they're going to provide safe, secure, sanitary facilities. These are just the basic issues. But what we also did is we went deeper than that. And I believe Wendy talked about the family handbook that they developed that really articulated how families can, what their expectations for the juvenile justice system are and what their rights are. And we did the same thing here. We articulated more what those rights are. And just as an example, one of the handbook says, like right number 8 says, as a parent, you have the right to meaningful participation in your child's treatment, including medical treatment, behavioral health treatment, and education. In our handbook, we went on to detail that means you have the right to contribute to an individual case plan. You have the right to request parent-teacher meetings. You have the right to attend a family orientation. And so we really specified exactly what that means. What we also did is we wanted to put in that TJJD now would protect parents' rights. So if any of these rights have been violated, you have the right for us to come back and we will address that. We made these posters that you see here, and we put them all across every campus, every visitation room, every parole office, everywhere where kids and families gathered. We had these posters. We also did the family handbook that was sent out immediately upon a child's commitment to the state juvenile correctional facility so that the parents would immediately have information about what their expectations should be with regard to visitation. What are the policies? How do you get information about what's going on? The way that we designed the family handbook, and you'll see a picture of it later on, was we wanted it to be just like any family would want information. If my child was going to a Girl Scout camp, what information would I need? I would want to know, can they receive mail? What happens if she gets sick? Do I need to pack clothes? You know, all the different aspects of care when your child is away from home, plus what your rights are as a parent since your child is incarcerated. We also wanted to involve families in policy development. One of the things that we did was we went back and looked at our entire youth grievance system. What happens if a youth has a complaint? How is that communicated? How is that treated? How is that addressed? And what we did is I went to some of the most vocal and angriest critics at that time, the parents who were really the angriest. And I went and I listened to them for several days, and then I asked them to help improve the system. And so that youth grievance system was revised with the input, direct input from the families and from the young people that it serves. And so as a result, our youth grievance system reflects the needs and desires of the families and youth. We also involved family members as helping us to develop the individual case plan, the quarterly progress reports, and the youth's reentry plan. And an example of that was the feedback that we got from the quarterly progress reports was that the families wanted it to really look more like a traditional report card rather than a bunch of bureaucracies. And so we changed that to reflect what the parents really needed and wanted. We also asked several family members to participate with us on an early prototype of what was the release review panel, looking at those youth who had met a minimum length of stay and determining if they still needed to be in a secure facility or if they could transition back to the community. And then, like many of you on the call, we also have specific policies requiring family involvement, and we can, I've got that link available also if anyone would like to see that. One of the other initiatives that we started with in 2007 was we hired 6 family liaisons, and we based those in our state juvenile correctional facilities. These were folks that were designed to help families have voice and choice with their youth rehabilitation. We involved family partners who helped to design and approve the job description. I also asked family members to participate in interview panels for each of those positions. We have provided special training for the liaisons, which that's like system of care training, wraparound training, cultural competency, family engagements. And then one of the other things, besides promoting the voice and choice, is to really help plan and coordinate events to increase family engagement. Now, in the past 7 years, those positions have morphed a little bit, but they're still active, they're still involved, and they're still helping families to be full partners with the correctional team with the youth rehabilitation. We now have 3 family liaisons at our urban parole offices as well. Some of the family engagement activities are, basically some family events. For example, open houses. One of the things that we wanted to do was when a kid is in public school in the community, they often have open houses to celebrate the end of a semester or the end of a semester and offer families the opportunity to meet teachers. We wanted to do the same thing with our kids who are at a state juvenile correctional facility. So we started doing the open houses for the schools, as well as we've offered tours of dorms and the cafeteria and the facilities themselves. We might have family days where families are brought on campus for barbecues or Easter hunts or Christmas parties. We also have graduation banquets. They've done certain special things like having family pictures. A lot of times our families don't have the opportunity to have family pictures. And so just by bringing in a photographer who can be available to take family pictures, that means a great deal to our families. Special initiatives, that's like a fatherhood development program. A lot of times we forget that some of the kids who are in our care are already parents. And so how do we bring them up to be nurturing parents as well? And so some of our fatherhood development initiatives and parenting initiatives have come through there. Transportation and lodging are also really big barriers to family engagement, especially in a state as big as Texas. And so one of the things that we've done is we've hired buses who can pick up families in Houston and take them to Gainesville, several hours away, to visit their children. We've also been able to offer families either reimbursement for gas or a bus ticket or hotel costs to enable them to be full partners with the treatment plan. Multifamily groups while the youth is in placement. This is especially important for our kids who have sexual offenses. Before they can really reintegrate back into the family, we need the whole family to go through treatment, and we often have provided multifamily groups. We have parent volunteers in some of our parole offices. It makes a big difference when a parent volunteer calls parents, inviting them to participate in an orientation, compared to a parole officer calling a parent and inviting them to participate. We've seen a very vast difference in being able to reach our parents by using parent volunteers. We've had parent advisory councils. We often offer educational groups and seminars as well. Most recently, we've been offering stipends to attend conferences. We just completed our 2014 10th Annual Strengthening Youth and Families Conference. We were able to partner with our Department of State Health Services, which is the mental health authority here, and we were able to offer stipends and scholarships for several parents to attend this conference and learn more about how to build healthy and strong families as well. And then the next one is about family voice and treatment. How do we really do that? And we've talked a little bit about voice and choice, but also partnering up with the family liaison, being able to sit with the family in ARD meetings, in the multidisciplinary team meetings, helping with the reentry planning and talking with the family about what that means and how that's going to work. Having family liaisons partner with the families for the parole intake and being available to them. We've planned some community-based family forums so that when the families can't necessarily get to an institution, we can bring the institution to them. We can bring speakers, we can bring slideshows, we can bring video of this is what the school that your child attends, this is what a dorm looks like, that sort of thing. And then one of the other activities that our family liaisons are working hard on is providing information and referrals for family members, recognizing that sometimes our families face many more challenges than just that their child is locked up. They've got a lot of other stuff going on. And how do we provide the services, supports, and resources that will address the needs of the whole family? And then I've talked about the parent volunteers. We understand that it's a lot about making connections. We have seen some peer support groups for families. We focus on what the needs of the families are. Sometimes they say they need computer skills or financial planning or job search, et cetera, and so we can offer classes based upon what their needs are, as well as seminars with expert speakers, especially for our families whose kids have mental health needs. Sometimes the families just need additional information on what does this particular diagnosis mean for me and my child over the next several years. We can also invite family members to present at staff pre-service trainings or in-service programs. And then I talked a little bit about creating stipends and then continuing to invite parents to serve on planning and advisory groups. Sort of akin to Pennsylvania's MONOGRAPH, we've had our family-friendly publications as well. We have the Family Handbook here, we have the Parents' Bill of Rights, and then we have this other, the ABCs of Engaging Families. And it's just geared to be a reminder that as we go through our daily lives, there's some very easy things that we can do to engage families in every aspect of our business. And similar to Wendy, talking about her surveys, we've been doing surveys every 2 years since March of 2008 was our baseline. And what we do is we distribute parent surveys through mail, email. We provide them at the visitation areas and any special events. Right now, we also have it available on the front page of our website so that we can get honest, authentic, meaningful feedback from parents. We then change things that aren't working because what we want to do is work to exceed parents' expectations. What we find is that parents tend to want better and more frequent communication regarding their child. They want involvement in reentry planning earlier in the child's stay. We need to work on our grievance processes to make sure that the parents understand how that works, as well as issues like the cost of snacks in the vending machine is too high. We get a lot of different feedback. Some of it is about policies, much of it is about practices. But we also find out that by and large, most of the parents acknowledge the positive changes that their youths are experiencing and are happy with the treatment that they're providing. Our family engagement curriculum, we called it Bringing It Home, how to engage families involved with the juvenile justice system. You see the learning objectives detailed there. When we first started discussing it, there was some discussion about, do we want to teach families how to be engaged in the juvenile justice system, or do we need to teach the juvenile justice system how to be involved with families? And what we found out is that we could teach families all day long the skills and the tips of the trade on how to be engaged in the juvenile justice system, but until the juvenile justice system was ready for families to be involved, we were afraid families would just get hit with frustration and dead ends. And so what we decided to do was really look at what do we need to do within the juvenile justice system to get people to buy into the idea of family engagement. Our curriculum, we developed it, we piloted it, and we revised it We piloted it again. We revised it again. It is now about 5 or 6 hours. It was developed through the participation in the Models for Change, and we're very appreciative of that. Our final curriculum as it stands now, we have videos from actual family members, and it's not a scripted video. It is, we asked the questions and they gave us the answers, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's where we need to improve, but it's all very real and very meaningful and very authentic. And it ends with practical strategies about what you can do as a juvenile justice professional to engage families. What are the small steps? Sort of like Wendy was talking about, you can call families back. You can give them your email. These are very practical strategies. What we found as we worked on this with family members is that much of the time it doesn't require a lot of money or a lot of hard work. It requires a change in assumptions and expectations of our staff. We have begun rolling that out now, and it's been very well received so far. Our next steps, what we've done so far has really been largely within our state juvenile correctional facilities. We're now working on increasing family engagement in probation departments. We've offered the family engagement curriculum to several different probation departments. We're also working with statewide family organization on juvenile justice certification for family partners. Each of our local mental health authorities has a family partner, and they have a variety of training, one of which is now juvenile justice. And so they have developed a curriculum that we worked with them on to endorse the family partners for receiving this juvenile justice certification. So we're working very closely with them so that families who are involved in the local mental health authorities and with the mental health system know how to interact with the juvenile justice system in a way that would best benefit them. And then we're beginning the partnership for the Strengthening Youth and Families Conference for 2015. And I think that's it for my section. And I see that I have a question. Let's see what it says. For those of you that can't see it, it says, is the data kept for evidence-based practices for future training parent advocates as the positions have morphed? To some degree, and thank you for the question. I appreciate that. What we've done is we recognize that it's an organic system. And so while it's not necessarily planning on family liaisons as an evidence-based practice and collecting the data in that format, what we are doing is keeping a record of the changes that have happened in the system as we've moved forward so that we have an understanding of what's going on. Does anyone else have any questions?
Tracy, I'm just noticing a question that was posted below that was asking whether any of these efforts to include family involvement has had an impact on your recidivism rate in and out of your correctional facilities.
Thank you, and I just scrolled down and I saw it as well, so thank you for bringing that to my attention, Kathy. I don't know that we've seen that decrease in the recidivism rate yet. We've had so much going on, and for other agencies that are in reform, I know that you can appreciate the number of changes and the lack of stability sometimes as you move forward with true reform. And so I don't know that we have been able to see the decrease in recidivism yet, but I'm hopeful that we will.
Great. One more question, Tracy. It's posed, the question is, how do you notify parents about your family engagement activities?
Well, thank you, Kathy. One of the things is that handbook is sent out immediately. The family liaisons also contact the families immediately upon commitment to the Juvenile Justice Department. And so those are two things. The other is once the youth is committed to the state juvenile correctional facility and is in a placement, that family liaison then sends information out to the family. They can go through the case manager, they can go through the family liaison to get the information out. I know that they're also making an effort to collect email addresses because I believe, like Wendy said, so many of our families either have cell phones and email addresses, and so that makes for an easy way to communicate, as well as through the already established methods of and timing of things like the case plan review, the reentry plan review, the quarterly progress reports, that sort of thing. I also see that somebody asked me about how did we get funding for the transportation for families. This is through each of our state juvenile correctional facilities has a 501c3 volunteer organization that works with the youth in that facility. And it's made up of volunteers. They are 501c3s, and they raise money to help our families and youth out for those sorts of transportation and lodging. And let's see what else. How can you get the ABCs? If you can send a request to Kathy and to the, I think you're going to have a contact at the bottom of the presentation. We can send that out.
Great. Thank you so much, Tracy and Wendy. And that's a nice segue into the closing slide. As I mentioned earlier, we will be posting the slides, the audio, all of the chat discussions and the questions that were posed to us here that some of which we were not able to get to on the actual webinar. We'll be putting all of that up on the CFC site along with responses to some of the critical questions to share those with all of you. So you can look for that update on our site within the next 3 to 4 days. The other thing I want to pose out there is that if anybody has any additional questions, would like copies of any of the materials, much of what both Tracy and Wendy described today can be found on the CFC website, but I think there are a few odds and ends pieces that we might need to get from them. So if you have any questions, you want any of that stuff, please reach out to us at the email address that's listed on the second bullet of the slide. And the last thing I want to mention is that this is part, and many of you may know this, but this is part of a webinar series on family involvement. This was the first in a two-part series. Our next webinar on family involvement is scheduled for December 4th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And in this webinar, we're going to feature 2 additional states that, of course, were part of our network, Illinois and Washington, who opted to focus more on kind of family advocacy and family informational innovations. Illinois, in particular, initiated a Know Your Rights campaign for both youth and families, and there's guides and trainings and all sorts of great stuff that provide good guidance to families and to youth in particular if they are to become involved with the justice system. And then our representative from Washington State will talk about a really great model called Juvenile Justice 101, which is a peer support program that provides families whose kids are involved with the justice system with information about the system and community resources. It meets in the lobby of the King County, Seattle courthouse once a week, so it's a really terrific model. So lastly, I would like to thank Wendy Luckenbill and Tracy Levins for giving us their time today and for the wonderful work that they've spearheaded in their states and for sharing that with all of you who took an hour out of your day to join us on this webinar. So thanks everyone for your participation, and we hope you all can join us on December 4th. Have a great afternoon.